A groundbreaking study published just 3 weeks ago in the Journal of Neuroscience is forcing neurologists worldwide to completely rethink what we know about memory decline after 60. For years, doctors have told older adults the same thing. Memory loss is inevitable. Just accept it. Maybe do some crossword puzzles. But this new research involving over 12,000 participants across 15 years has revealed something absolutely shocking. Your brain's ability to form new memories and recall information can actually improve after 60, but only if you stop doing the three things that 90% of people your age are doing right now without even realizing it. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I've been a neurologist specializing in age-related cognitive health for over 20 years. I've treated thousands of patients who walked into my office convinced their memory problems were just part of getting older. And honestly, until I read this new research, I was partly responsible for that belief. But what I'm about to share with you today goes against everything I learned in medical school, and it's already changing lives in my practice. Now, before I reveal these three specific brain tricks that the study identified, you need to understand why the conventional advice you've been following might actually be making your memory worse. And to explain that, I need to tell you about someone I'll never forget. Her name was Margaret. Margaret was 68 when her daughter brought her to my office. She was a retired English teacher, sharp as a tack her whole life, someone who could quote Shakespeare from memory and never forgot a student's name even decades later. But over the past year, something had changed. She'd forget where she parked at the grocery store. She'd call her daughter 3 times asking the same question. She once left the stove on all day. I remember Margaret sitting in my office, hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than her 5'6" frame. Her daughter sat beside her, gripping a notebook filled with incidents she'd been tracking. Margaret looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "Doctor, am I losing myself?" I did all the standard tests: cognitive assessments, memory evaluations, brain scans. Everything came back within normal range for her age. So I did what most doctors do. I told her this was normal aging. I suggested she do puzzles, stay socially active, get good sleep. I told her to make lists, use her phone for reminders, accept that this is just what happens after 65. Margaret followed my advice religiously. She bought crossword puzzle books. She joined a book club. She set up elaborate reminder systems on her phone. Her daughter told me later that Margaret had sticky notes everywhere, color-coded calendars, alarms set for everything. 6 months later, Margaret's daughter called me in tears. Margaret had gotten lost driving home from the library, a route she'd taken hundreds of times. She'd become so anxious about forgetting things that she stopped going out. She'd withdrawn from her book club because she couldn't remember what she'd read. The vibrant, confident woman I'd met was becoming a shell of herself, paralyzed by the fear of her next memory lapse. Here's what breaks my heart about Margaret's story. Every single piece of advice I gave her was making her memory worse. The constant reminder systems were training her brain not to remember. The anxiety about memory loss was creating a stress cycle that actively damaged her ability to form new memories. The cognitive exercises I recommended were like trying to build muscle by only ever lifting the same 5-pound weight, not nearly challenging enough to create real change. Margaret's case haunted me. I started digging deeper into the research, questioning the standard protocols. And that's when I found the preliminary data that would eventually become this massive 15-year study. What I learned completely changed how I practice medicine. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this and maybe leave a comment below. How many reminder apps, alarms, or sticky notes do you use in a typical day? Because that number might be directly related to how well your memory is actually working. Now, let me explain what's really happening in your brain after 60, because understanding this is crucial. Your brain has about 86 billion neurons, and contrary to what we used to think, you're still creating new ones even in your 70s and 80s. This process is called neurogenesis, and it happens primarily in a region called the hippocampus, which is your brain's memory center. Think of your brain like a garden. For decades, neuroscientists thought that after a certain age, the garden stopped growing, that you were just maintaining what you already had, watching some plants die, unable to grow new ones. But we now know that's completely wrong. Your garden can absolutely grow new plants, create new pathways, bloom in ways it never has before. But here's the catch: most people are unknowingly poisoning their garden while trying to help it. Here's what happens when you rely heavily on external memory aids. Every time you set a reminder, instead of actively trying to remember something, you're telling your hippocampus, don't bother storing this. We've got it covered externally. Your brain is incredibly efficient. It doesn't waste energy on processes it doesn't need. So when you outsource your memory to your phone, your brain literally starts shrinking the neural networks responsible for memory formation. It's use it or lose it, but we've been using it wrong. The second thing happening is stress-induced cortisol damage. When you're anxious about forgetting something, your body releases cortisol. In small doses, cortisol is fine, but chronic anxiety about memory creates chronic cortisol elevation, and cortisol is directly toxic to the hippocampus. It's like watering your garden with salt water because you're worried the plants aren't growing fast enough. The worry itself becomes the poison. The third mechanism is what researchers call cognitive underload. You know how muscles atrophy when you don't use them? Your brain works the same way. Those crossword puzzles and word searches everyone recommends, they're too easy. Once you've learned the patterns, you're not challenging your brain anymore. You're just repeating familiar neural pathways. It's like walking the same route every single day and wondering why you're not getting fitter. Your brain needs novelty, difficulty, and genuine challenge to strengthen memory networks. And here's the fourth piece that ties it all together. Most people over 60 have completely stopped the one activity that creates the strongest, most lasting memories. We'll get to what that is in just a moment, but first, understand this. Your brain doesn't decline because of age. It declines because of how we respond to age. So here's what that massive 15-year study actually found. And this is the information I promised you at the beginning. Researchers tracked 12,000 adults between the ages of 60 and 85, monitoring their daily activities, stress levels, cognitive challenges, and memory performance. They identified three specific behaviors that predicted not just maintained memory, but improved memory function as people aged. The first trick: active recall under pressure. This is the exact opposite of what I told Margaret to do. Instead of setting reminders, participants who showed memory improvement deliberately practiced forgetting and then forcing themselves to remember. They'd meet someone new and intentionally not write down their name. They'd go to the grocery store without a list. They'd plan their day without checking their calendar first. The key was creating mild, manageable stress that forced their hippocampus to work. The study found that participants who practiced active recall for just 15 minutes a day showed a 23% improvement in memory tests over 2 years. That's not maintenance. That's improvement. Their brains were literally getting better at remembering because they were forcing the neural pathways to strengthen through use. The second trick: novel cognitive challenge. But here's where it gets specific. It wasn't about doing crossword puzzles. Participants who improved were learning genuinely new, complex skills that required multiple cognitive domains. Learning a new language, taking up a musical instrument they'd never played, learning to dance. The key was that it had to be frustratingly difficult at first. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. The research showed that adults over 60 who engaged in novel, complex learning for at least 3 hours per week increased their hippocampal volume by an average of 4% over 18 months. To put that in perspective, most people lose about 0.5% per year after 60. These people reversed several years of decline and added more capacity. The third trick, and this is the one that shocked me most: social storytelling. Not just socializing, but specifically sharing detailed stories from their past and actively listening to others' stories. When you recall a memory and verbalize it with details, sensory information, emotions, you're not just accessing that memory, you're strengthening it. And when you encode someone else's story by listening actively, you're building the exact neural pathways that create new memories. Participants who engaged in regular storytelling sessions just twice a week for an hour showed a 31% improvement in both short-term and long-term memory recall. That's massive, and it's something you can start doing today, right now, for free. Let me tell you what happened when I applied these findings to my practice. I had a patient named Robert, 72, former engineer, came to me with the same complaints as Margaret. Forgetting appointments, losing his keys, couldn't remember conversations with his grandchildren. His phone was full of reminders. He did Sudoku every morning. He was doing everything right by conventional standards. I sat Robert down and gave him a challenge. For 30 days, no reminder apps except for medical appointments. When he met someone new at his weekly coffee group, he had to remember their name without writing it down. When his wife asked him to pick up groceries, he had to memorize the list, not photograph it. I told him to make it a game. How much could he remember on his own? At the same time, I had Robert sign up for beginner piano lessons. He'd never played an instrument in his life. I told him it would be frustrating, and that was the point. And I connected him with a storytelling group at the local community center where people shared life experiences. Robert called me after 2 weeks, frustrated. He'd forgotten someone's name at coffee. He'd missed 2 items at the grocery store. His piano practice sounded terrible and made his fingers hurt. I told him that was perfect. Keep going. After 60 days, Robert came back for a follow-up. He walked in with a completely different energy. He told me he'd played a simple song for his grandkids. He knew everyone's name at his coffee group and could tell me details about their lives. Most importantly, he'd had an entire weekend with his family where he didn't forget a single thing, and he realized he hadn't thought about his memory problems the entire time. We tested him. His recall had improved by 18%. Not maintained. Improved. Then there's Linda, 65, who came to me after early retirement because she was terrified she was developing dementia. She'd been relying so heavily on her phone and written notes that she felt like she couldn't remember anything anymore. Her anxiety was through the roof. I had Linda do something radical, take a weekend trip without her phone, just a notebook for emergencies, but she had to rely entirely on her memory for directions, schedules, and plans. She thought I was crazy, but she did it. She got a little lost. She missed a lunch reservation, but she also navigated an entire weekend using only her brain, and she came back energized. Linda then joined a community theater group, something she'd never done before. She had to memorize lines, blocking, cues, all genuinely difficult cognitive work. She started a weekly dinner with friends where they shared stories from their childhood, trying to remember as many details as possible. 4 months later, Linda scored better on memory assessments than she had at 60. She told me she felt sharper than she had in 10 years. And then there's James, 78, who everyone assumed was too old for improvement. He'd been having significant memory issues, and his family was looking into assisted living. I convinced them to try this approach first. James started learning woodworking, a complex skill requiring spatial memory, sequential steps, and problem solving. He joined a men's group that shared war stories and family histories. We eliminated 90% of his reminder systems. It took longer with James, about 6 months, but his family called me crying with joy. James had helped his grandson build a birdhouse from memory, following a complex plan. He was recounting stories from his childhood with clarity they hadn't heard in years. He wasn't cured of all memory issues, but he'd regained enough function to stay independent. These aren't isolated cases. I've seen this pattern with dozens of patients now. The key is consistency and the willingness to be uncomfortable. So here's my question for you, and I really want to hear from you in the comments. What's one skill you've always wanted to learn but thought you were too old for? Because that might be exactly what your brain needs. Now, let me give you a specific, actionable protocol you can start tomorrow. This is what I give my patients, and it works. Step 1. The Memory Challenge Morning Routine. When you wake up before checking your phone, spend 5 minutes recalling yesterday in as much detail as possible. What did you eat for each meal? Who did you talk to? What were you wearing? What did you watch or read? Force yourself to remember without looking at anything. This strengthens your consolidation of recent memories. Step 2. Eliminate one reminder system per week. Start small. Maybe week 1, you stop setting reminders for regular appointments you should remember, your weekly coffee date, your Sunday call with your sister. Write them down once in a dedicated notebook if you need backup, but try to remember first. Week 2, grocery shop without a list. Week 3, Remember birthdays without phone notifications. Gradually build your memory muscle. Step 3. Learn something genuinely new and difficult. Sign up for a class in something you've never done: pottery, guitar, a foreign language, ballroom dancing, woodworking, painting. It needs to be challenging enough that you struggle at first. Commit to at least 3 hours per week for minimum 3 months. This is non negotiable for building new neural pathways. Step 4. Join or create a storytelling practice. This could be a formal group or informal gatherings with friends. Once or twice a week, spend an hour sharing detailed memories. The key is detail. Don't just say, "I remember my first car." Describe the color, the smell, how the steering wheel felt, where you drove it first, who was with you, what song was on the radio. Rich, sensory details strengthen memory networks. Step 5. Implement strategic stress. Once a day, put yourself in a situation where you have to remember something important without backup. Navigate somewhere new without GPS. Call someone without looking up their number. Recall a recipe from memory. These small challenges create the adaptive stress that strengthens your hippocampus. Step 6. Talk to your doctor about implementing this approach. Show them this information. Ask them to track your progress with standardized memory assessments every 3 months. Having objective measurements helps you see improvement and adjust the protocol as needed. Step 7. Watch for these positive signs. You'll know it's working when you stop thinking about your memory constantly, when you find yourself recalling details without trying, when you feel more confident in social situations, when you stop reaching for your phone to check something you already know. These are indicators that your brain is rebuilding its memory networks. Here's what I need you to understand. Everything I've just shared with you goes against conventional medical advice that's been given for decades. You might take this information to your doctor and they might dismiss it. That's okay. The research is new and medicine moves slowly. But the science is solid, and the results I've seen are undeniable. Your memory after 60 is not a fixed, declining resource. It's a dynamic system that responds to how you use it. You've been told to compensate for memory loss, to work around it, to accept it. But compensation without challenge leads to atrophy. What your brain needs is the right kind of stress, the right kind of challenge, and trust in its own capability. Margaret's story doesn't end sadly, by the way. When I learned about this research, I called her daughter and asked if Margaret would be willing to try a completely different approach. She was skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything. We started slowly. Piano lessons, a memoir writing group, reducing her reminder systems gradually. It took almost a year, but Margaret is now 73 and sharper than she was at 68. She leads the memoir writing group. She plays piano at community events. She told me recently that she feels like she got herself back. That's what's possible when you stop fighting against your brain's natural capability and start working with it. Your memory doesn't have to decline. It can improve, expand, and surprise you. But it requires you to challenge everything you've been told about aging. So here's what I want you to do right now. Hit that like button if this information surprised you or challenged what you thought you knew about memory and aging. Subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep sharing research-backed strategies that go against conventional wisdom, but actually work. And most importantly, share this video with someone you love who's worried about their memory. This information could change their life the way it changed Margaret's, Robert's, Linda's, and James's. Next week, I'm releasing a video about the 5 foods that are scientifically proven to accelerate brain aging after 60. And number 3 is something 90% of people eat every single day thinking it's healthy. You won't want to miss that. Remember, your brain is not your enemy. It's your most powerful tool, and it's been waiting for you to challenge it properly. Start today. Choose one new skill, eliminate one reminder system, and share one detailed story with someone you care about. That's all it takes to begin reversing years of decline. You're not losing your mind. You've just been using it wrong. Now you know better. Now you can do better. I'll see you next week.